ago, people lived in peace, bathed in the warmth of light. Everyone loved the light. Then, people began to fight over it. They wanted to keep it for themselves. And darkness was born in their hearts. The darkness spread, swallowing the light in many people's hearts. It covered everything, and the world disappeared. But small fragments of light survived in the hearts of children. With these fragments of light, children rebuilt the lost world. It's the world we live in now.
What is going on, everyone? It's Jay here. So I'm bringing you the promised video where I'm going to be basically explaining the Kingdom Hearts key story and the lore of the story. The reason why I'm going to be doing this is because there are a lot of people who don't want to be playing the mobile game in order to get the story of that game, because it is canon. And then there are also others who haven't played the Kingdom Hearts key on the PC browser, which of course is understandable because it's fairly difficult to get that access to there, but also being the reason that it just ended and the servers are going down. But basically the story has finally ended on the PC version, so I'm going to be explaining the whole story from start to finish, at least what we have now, because Tetsuya Nomura did confirm that after Kingdom Hearts key cover is finished over in Kingdom Hearts Unchained key, it's going to be going into its own story, what he called Season 2. So let's get right into this, but first I want to let you guys know very quickly that this video is going to be probably relatively long. So I'm going to be splitting it up into 2 to 4 parts. It's possible that this section is going to be one part in and of itself, but it might also be a little bit longer than I expected. So I might split it up into 2 parts, and then the next part that has all the Kingdom Hearts key story, as far as the rest of it, that might be a part in and of itself as well. So I was just letting you guys know. But let's get right into this. You begin with creating the appearance of your player, and as your heart forms your new body, you are greeted with 5 different unions of power to choose from: Anguis, Unicornus, Leopardus, Vulpes, and Ursus. In the midst of awakening, you are almost consumed by darkness, but a keyblade materializes in your hand and drives the darkness away. Your player emerges from darkness into the realm of light, and a friendly creature called Chirithy appears before you and gives you the basic rundown of the keyblade, darkness, and the new world that you were just born in. He also explains the purpose of your existence and that it is to vanquish the darkness in this world and several others. After you destroy a few Heartless, your Union Master appears before you and tells you that in order to defeat strong Heartless, you must use the power of your friends to become stronger. And also states that there are others that don't seek out light, but instead they seek out darkness, and you must be wary of them. Your player then goes out on an adventure to other worlds to destroy the darkness that hides within them. Little time has passed, and you see a falling star land somewhere in Daybreak Town. When you go to investigate, you actually meet Donald and Goofy, who crash landed in your world. Somehow, it's not even fully explained. You then gladly decide to help them and find missing gummy blocks when the gummy ship's been completely dismantled upon landing, because Heartless are holding some and they don't have their weapons to get it themselves. I think it may be important just to point out that after you explain to Donald why you have a Keyblade, he mentions he's never heard of the Foretellers before, because Mickey has a Keyblade. However, the world and time that they're in is where the distribution of Keyblades began, so that's where it's a little bit confusing. Anyways, you find a special gummy block and walk out of the building. You are surrounded by Heartless almost immediately, only to be saved by Mickey as he arrives on his star shard. You explain that you've been helping out his friends Donald and Goofy find gummy blocks. Then Mickey introduces Chip and Dale and asks you to take them to the ship to help out rebuild it correctly. Before you leave, Mickey mentions he needs to look into something, and once you leave, he speaks aloud, noticing that it wasn't the star shard that led him here, and questions why he was landed in Daybreak Town as he looks up. And when he looks up, the camera pans up to see a black coated figure atop a building. After you collect a few more gummies, you arrive back to Donald and Goofy. When you drop off Chip and Dale, they explain that there are core parts needed to complete the ship, so you set off to find those core parts. Once you do, you return them to the crew and they finish the ship's assembly. But Donald presses the wrong button and they are forced to take off immediately or the ship would fall apart. Just in the nick of time, Mickey arrives and boards the gummy ship and they leave your world and time. After they have left, Chirithy appears and simply acknowledges them, but ends with saying so he's the king, implying he knows of him, which is again not explained to this day. Before any more events occur, we get some dialogue from Chirithy and it briefly sheds light on the moment of him being born, stating that it was pure darkness until he was born into a world of light, and when he awakens his master smiles down on him. And it's worth mentioning his master, the one who created him, is the Master of Masters. After this, you go to meet Chirithy in the Fountain Square, and he then says it's time you knew about how this all came to be. And I think you guys know this information well enough, but for the sake of the video, I'll re-explain. Before the Master of Masters disappeared, he bestowed names upon his 6 apprentices and passed down the Book of Prophecies to 5 of those who came to be known as Foretellers. When the Foretellers read the manuscript, they were shocked at the final entry. The fated land will be the battleground for a great war, and on that land shall darkness prevail and light expire. So in order to prevent that from happening, the Foretellers wrote and drew into the book powers that harness incredible strength from the future to protect the light and keep worlds safe from the darkness. These were called fragments, but also known as medals, or cards, in Kingdom Hearts Key. And he finishes off with just mentioning that each Foreteller has the same goal, but go down different paths, and you shouldn't lose sight of your own. As you wander around Daybreak Town, you find yourself meeting other Keyblade wielders. When they mention that there's talk of a new Heartless in the town, the 4 of you decide to split up and search for those Heartless to defeat them and then to meet back in the same place at the end of the day. This is when I believe your Chirithy meets with another Chirithy, and they talk about their players. The other Chirithy states that his player seems indifferent and doesn't quite get the grasp of the world that they live in, while your Chirithy states that they need to put trust into their wielders that they will flourish. The end of the day comes and you go back to where you met those wielders. As you arrive, a Chirithy appears saying he's not coming, and he left a message saying, "I'm sorry I couldn't keep our promise." Now this could either be from the wielders that you met earlier or your own Chirithy. It's a little bit unknown only because there is no mention of a promise any time before this, then that Chirithy disappears. We come back to possibly your Chirithy and the Chirithy he met earlier, only this time the Chirithy's player has disappeared into darkness. He begins to disappear himself because these Chirithys have a connection to their wielder. As he does, your union leader appears behind your Chirithy, mentioning that the rate of gathering Lux is extraordinary but the darkness is still continuing to spread at a faster pace. When Chirithy questions if there is a traitor among the five, your union leader says he doesn't want to believe that. It shows you sleeping in your room, as we see the ominous dream of inside the clock tower. All the foretellers are standing there listening to a mysterious black-coated figure speak to them. Inside the dream, you try to step closer to them as you're in the back of the room, but darkness surrounds you as you try, making you toss and turn and finally wake up. After your Chirithy tells you to go back to sleep, he turns around to the window asking, "Was that you?" to another Chirithy outside the window. The other Chirithy then confirms that yours showed you the dream and questions what you're attempting to do. After your Chirithy claims he's doing the exact opposite of what he's trying to do, the other one states that they must be enemies. Then he disappears. As he does, your Chirithy says that he will protect you because he has to. The day after that, you go to the waterfront to investigate a strong Heartless lurking there, but once you arrive, you see another player struggle but then defeat the Heartless. You politely walk up to him and help him up, and you introduce yourself to each other, as well as your respective union, and your new friend's name is Ephemera, previously thought to be known as Ephemera. He implies that even though you two are on different unions, he would tell you what his mission today is because it's his own mission outside of his union. He then explains to you that in reality, the worlds that we have been entering to gather Lux and defend from darkness are all illusions, and the light that's being gathered is the light of this world you're in. He further goes into detail, sort of, by saying all the worlds are connected but it's impossible to reach them, so there's a special mechanism that projects those worlds to you so that you can gather Lux. And that's what Ephemera is trying to look into, how all this works, and he theorizes that it's the foreteller's book of prophecies that projects these illusions. That's when you tell him about your dream of the foretellers inside the clock tower. You both agree to investigate to try and find a way into the tower, but once you leave the waterfront, both your Chirithy and the mysterious darkened Chirithy appear. Yours questions if Ephemera is his player, and he answers vaguely saying, "I don't know. Is he?" And that's when your Chirithy notices that his color tint has changed, and the dark Chirithy wonders aloud what your Chirithy is going to do now that you're getting closer to the truth. After some searching, you and Ephemera find a way into the tower through a sewer system, and you end up in the underground passage of the tower. But once you get further inside, you guys stop at what seems to be the way that leads to the foreteller's room. Ephemera thinks it may be a good idea to call it a day and meet at the Fountain Square to come back the next day. That's when you go back to your room, and before you fall asleep, you tell your Chirithy about your day and the new friend that you made from another union, and you state that Chirithy is your friend too. Before the next day comes though, we see an omniscient point of view of Ephemera going back to the entrance to the deeper interior of the tower as he admittedly breaks his promise. From the morning to night, you waited for Ephemera at the Fountain Square until your Chirithy comes trying to lift your spirits because Ephemera never showed up that day. He also tells you that he doesn't want to see you sad because it'll make him sad. You're friends after all. So you lift him up in happiness, but as you lift him up, his cape flaps up and you see the Dream Eater spirit symbol on his back. This explains how he was able to show you a dream that night before, and possibly how you go into these illusions or dreams of worlds. We see Ephemera sitting on the fountain next to the Vulpes foreteller Ava, after you both initially found the underground passage. He notices that she doesn't seem like herself, but he tries to lift her spirits by talking about the Book of Prophecies, and she quickly rejects the topic. Ephemera says he was just kidding and mentions that he made a friend from a different union, after Ava had wished that all the union leaders could work together and be friends. Once Ephemera leaves to be prepared for the next day, Ava says aloud she wants to leave the future world in the hands of children who see the world like we do, telling us to let the wind guide us as she calls out to the dandelions. The next day comes and you're waiting at the Fountain Square for Ephemera. He arrives as he is very apologetic for not coming as he promised, but he wants to make it up to you by finally going inside the tower. When you both arrive, you stand there in front of the entrance seeming as if you're a little bit hesitant. That's when Ephemera says he was afraid that was going to happen, telling you that he'll be waiting for you as he slowly disappears with dandelions flying away when he does, causing you to wake up. Once you and your Chirithy are awake, you immediately suggest that you're going to go to the tower to look for Ephemir because of your dream. Ephemir, being completely against the idea, mentions that it wouldn't be good timing because the foretellers are beginning to have philosophical differences at the time. But you go to the tower anyway, disregarding what he said. When you go back down to the passage that you and Ephemir found, you see Master Ava there, and she's clearly waiting for you because she called you by name. After you explain to her why you're going down there, being that you heard rumors of her and him being closely in contact, and also that you had a dream of Ephemir, Master Ava then further digs for information, confirming that because of that you are a suspect of her as far as where Ephemir is. She says that your assumptions is not far off base, but she can't tell you anything else, and that's when she draws her Keyblade against you as you do the same. After the fight, she announces that you have the potential as a wielder, but she can feel your sadness in the exchange of blows, and mentions if you hang on to that sadness, it'll lead you to darkness. After that, she just tells you to go home, and that the area you're trying to access is restricted. Before it goes any further though, it shows us Ephemir going into the passage entrance without us again, but this time as he goes through the gear, he turns around and notices someone approach him from behind, but for us, he's just a shadow. We come back to your room as you're sleeping. Chirithy just mentions that he never thought you'd have to face a foreteller. That's when Ava appears in your room saying she didn't want to do it, and asks Chirithy if he was the one who showed you the dream of Ephemir. When he denies, Ava further explains how it's possible that Ephemir is getting closer to the truth, being able to show her a dream through a realm that he is in right now, making him in an unchained state. When he tried to reach out to you, the connection was strong enough between you two to get the message to you through dreams, but also that you yourself are getting closer to the Unchained realm itself as well. Ava states, as long as you continue to follow the path that you're taking, you may find the truth, and that Chirithy needs to protect you from nightmares so that the wind can carry you away from there. And I think this wraps up the first part of the Kingdom Hearts Key or Unchained Key story and lore video. Stay tuned for the next one, where we're going to be talking about a new character that comes into play, as well as some new information that we get from foretellers and other interesting factors. Be sure to subscribe so that you know when those videos come out, and like this video up simply because if you didn't want to play the game and you're getting all this information and you like the way that I'm narrating it and stuff like that, you know, I like the feedback. Thank you, and see you guys in the next video.